monster. You don't belong in this world.
In 1986, a group of really talented Japanese people created the gothic horror side-scrolling action game Castlevania. You play as Simon Belmont, a leather-clad, whip-using, Jesus-loving, proud member of the Belmont clan. A bloodline destined to hunt the night and beat Dracula's vampiric ass every 100 years or so. Unlike other games of its time, I gotta say Castlevania makes you genuinely terrified of what's gonna come around the corner. NES games have their hard moments, but Castlevania really makes you feel like this defenseless little man with a bitch-ass jump arc and long animation windups. Everything on the player's part feels so deliberate, with the level design forcing you to use all the tools at your disposal or suck eggs and die. Finishing an especially hard level after exhausting your sub-weapons and inhuman reflexes only to barely come out on top is seriously enthralling in a way that only Castlevania can provide. But Castlevania 1 wasn't only set apart by its tense gameplay, but also for its commitment to a gothic-styled atmosphere and artwork. As you've already seen with your eyeballs, the in-game sprite art is already dripping with spooky and gloomy vibes that you simply can't find in real life. But the fun doesn't end there. The box itself looks pretty fire too. Since it seemed like a lot of companies at the time were opting for the child predator route for box art, Konami decided they were gonna go against the grain and give their game a cover that wasn't shitty so that people might actually buy it. Even though it clearly takes a lot of inspiration from Norseman by Frank Frazetta and really isn't that much to write home about, Castlevania's box art still holds a lot of charm and quality, especially when you compare it to the total ass rip it was going up against. Dracula's goofy face and his dark looming castle take up so much of the frame, with Simon striking that iconic determined pose in the foreground. Even if he has to go through some wacky NES bullshit, by God, he's gonna whip some ass in the name of Jesus Christ if it's the last thing he does. Just like the game itself, this art feels heavy and thick, ominous yet strongly determined. Creepy backdrops paired with 80s action stars with big thighs, it must mean one thing. This is the first stage of Castlevania art, what I like to call the unga bunga era, or the twonk era if you prefer, for reasons I hope are obvious. It encompasses most of the classic linear Castlevania games, basically all the ones included in that anniversary collection. We are not at the hot vampires quite yet. Out of all the NES games, Castlevania 3's Japanese art has gotta be my favorite. The West got its own version that's totally serviceable, but this is what I'm talking about right here. All the playable characters are in front and center striking cool poses, and this eerie ass skull is looming over in the background. It's like they turned the original Castlevania's cover into this freaky B-movie horror poster, and it's a total improvement in my book. As the series grew from 8-bit to 16-bit, the boys and girls over at Konami would only expand on this beefy style with even crazier box arts. I always really liked the cover for Super Castlevania 4. It shows you how much of an action-packed, testosterone-filled ballbuster that game really is. I kinda prefer this over the original Japanese version. Is that a hot take? I hope not. That shit ugly. The Unga Bunga era always delivered hard on the goofs and the spooks, characterized by this really weighty art style that reflects how heavy the playable characters feel during gameplay. Just look at this dude from Castlevania Bloodlines. He's built like a damn forklift.
I was just sitting over there, and my dad was lifting over here.
On the topic of Bloodlines, its original cover is probably one of my favorites of this time period. The characters are doing these dope-ass poses against this sick, dark black and red background. It makes my eyeballs very happy, and so does the rest of the game in fact. The 16-bit Castlevania games are really where the in-game artwork was able to express the world that the box art promised, with these fantastically spooky and detailed character sprites and backgrounds, expanding upon what the 8-bit games were trying to go for. Bloodlines has these cool little cutscenes that try to mimic the official artwork to the best of its ability. And even if John Morris's neck is kinda non-existent, you gotta love that hustle. And we can't forget about all that cool parallaxing and screen effects that 16-bit Castlevania makes use of. There's this one part in Castlevania 4 that seriously messes with your head. The room's warping and spinning around and the frame rate eats shit like you're descending into the dark, twisting abyss. The last game that I consider to be in the twonk era is Rondo of Blood. Definitely one of my favorite classic Castlevania games, and one that seriously represents a stylistic shift in the series artwork. Rondo of Blood experiments with the big beefy man aesthetic of the series with a fresh 90s anime coat of paint. shown very prominently in the game's magnificent opening sequence and cutscenes. You can say it looks cringe-pilled all you want, but for one, I'm cringe-pilled. And also, it's not hard to admire what Konami was trying to do with the game's style. Rondo takes Castlevania in this hype, shonen anime direction, complete with rock and CD quality tunes and full voice acting. Not to mention the new style really lends itself well to making our boy Richter a likable protag, always showing this badass confidence and adorable compassion in all those cutscenes I mentioned.
You're too young for this. You just let the big hunter here take care of that bad man, okay?
Oh, you don't know anything. I can handle this just fine.
I have a framed picture of Richter in my room, and you cannot forget about that absolutely gorgeous sprite work and animation. Rondo of Blood is where I feel Castlevania hit its stride in terms of sprite work. 4 and Bloodlines still looked pretty dope, even if the animations were a bit stilted at times. But Rondo's animation quality sets a new precedent for the series going forward, with an attention to detail and fluidity I can't get enough of. Look at the way Richter's body ragdolls after getting punched, or how damn fluid Maria's walk cycle is, and how all the enemies explode in the satisfying blaze of glory.
It sounded so terrible. I know.
I also really don't want to forget about the cover art for Rondo of Blood's SNES port, Vampire's Kiss, also known as Dracula X in the US. This style looks so damn cool, and it's definitely an S tier as far as the unga bunga era is concerned.
Annette!
Richter!
Okay, we get it, Fish. You're a filthy little simp bitch. But where are those hot vampires like you promised? Well, after a consistent output of tight linear side-scrollers, Konami wanted to take Castlevania in a far more mature, open-ended, and dare I say, pretty direction. Welcome to the pretty boy era, starting with Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Pardon, but what is your name?
I'm Richter Belmont, the vampire hunter.
Richter. Go with God's protection.
Alucard, what is your business here?
I've come to put an end to this.
Still befriending mortals. I'll not ask you to return to our side, but I demand you cease your attack.
I will not.
You shall regret those words. We will meet again.
Special K.
The year is 1997. Good Burger just dropped, everyone's getting down and dirty with Tekken 3 and some Star Fox Rumble Pack action. I'm currently not alive yet, and you open up your fresh, spicy new issue of EGM to see the all-new Castlevania Symphony of the Night staring back at you in all its glory. It's got this insane new art style that looks nothing like the Castlevanias that came before it. And you kinda like it. Well damn, I wanna take a moonlight stroll with Alucard. This right here is the work of absolute unit Ayami Kojima, a self-taught freelance artist who went from drawing sad pretty boys to drawing sad pretty boys. It cannot be understated how absolutely breathtaking Ayami Kojima's work is, with all the promotional art and design she made for Symphony looking so meticulous and handcrafted. I especially like this piece in particular, where you can see the rough texture of the material just sticking off the page. In my research, I found this website called Vampire Killer that was incredibly useful for getting all those exclusive art book scans of Kojima's work. Definitely sneak a peek if you're interested. I'll post a link to the site below. I was able to come across these cool-ass Prologue manga pages that were included in Symphony's art book. Even if they're rendered in just black and white, these are still some of my favorite works from her and show how strong her compositions tend to be. Symphony of the Night was director Koji Igarashi's attempt to kick new life into the stagnating Castlevania franchise. By taking some cues from the Fire Super Metroid, his team built this detailed, explorable maze-like castle that players could get lost in for hours on end, finding new weapons and armor to buff up Alucard so he can kick his dad's ass. This was my first Castlevania game, and beyond just that addicting gameplay, the visual style was what really drew me into this series. Being a direct sequel to the events of Rondo of Blood, the quality of the sprites and animations carried over, with Alucard having some of the smoothest animation cycles I've ever seen in my entire life. His flowing majestic hair and after images make you feel like this powerful, hot vessel of destruction. And just like the last game, the enemies always die in the most satisfying way possible. It even gets kind of obnoxious sometimes. And if you manage to pry your eyes off the action for a bit, you might notice these insanely detailed backgrounds that give the castle so much life, always setting the mood perfectly. I really like this vertical section with the purple towers. It gives the impression that there's so much more to Dracula's castle that's just barely out of reach. And then there's one of my favorite areas in any game ever, the underground caverns. I got a thing for underground waterfalls and cool frogs, so this place is always the highlight of my playthrough. In my humble, objective opinion, Symphony of the Night holds up as one of the best looking 2D games out there, with Hayao Kojima's incredible character designs only serving to pull you further and further into the game's world. But it's too bad those absolute troglodytes at the American localization team weren't as enlightened as you and me. When they slapped this stupid ass looking castle on the box art instead of using the original, far more based artwork. We can only be thankful that the localization team didn't commit this kind of war crime for the rest of the series, proudly presenting Kojima's artwork right on the front cover where it belongs. She would continue to lend her talents to a lot of the other games, bringing her skills to the 1999 release of Castlevania Chronicles, yet another remake of Simon Belmont's first leather-clad outing, where she would design him with dope red hair and expensive-looking designer brand battle gear. You know, I like the iteration they used for Smash, but I'm always gonna wish they included this as a skin or something. This Simon looks like he's about to murder Dracula so he can get back to his full modeling career. It's kind of badass in a sort of classy way. And that's how I describe a lot of Kojima's work for the rest of the Pretty Boy era, where it's not just about killing demons anymore, it's about looking pretty while doing it. The 3D beat-em-up PS2 Castlevania games really exemplify this, being some of her best work in my opinion. Lament of Innocence in particular has some damn gorgeous art. The game takes us all the way back to the start of the battle between the Belmont gang and Dracula, where we meet our main man Leon Belmont and his ex-homie turned vampire god Matthias Kronkvist, both highly respected and highly attractive members of the church. And their fits really sell that, like, damn. They made a calendar for this game, and I'd definitely say it deserves it. But if you want to talk about fits, take a look at her art for all the Game Boy Advance titles, specifically Aria of Sorrow. To give you some context, it takes place in the year 2035, 36 years after the Demon Castle War of 1999, where everyone collectively decided they were beyond sick of Dracula's shit and pulled up to his castle with their battle tanks and AKs and finally defeated him once and for all.
Graham Ranch is under siege.
So you play as the reincarnation of Dracula, a Japanese high school student named Soma Cruz, styling with his beautiful white hair and bougie-ass Gucci jacket complete with a comfy-looking black turtleneck shirt. I don't care if he's from the future or a reincarnation of Dracula or what, no high school student has any business rocking that fit so hard. Aria of Sorrow's artwork has got to be some of my favorite in the series, making it a real shame that Kojima's art wasn't used for its sequel, Dawn of Sorrow, on the DS. Maybe the word garbage is a bit harsh because it could be worse, but I can't really think of any other word when we go from these handcrafted, beautiful masterpieces to this shit right here. Okay, what the hell is this? No more comfy turtleneck, just this gross skin-tight muscle suit. I hope somebody got fired for that blunder. I think the team wanted to reach a different audience with this art style change, but thankfully it didn't last for too long before the series would go back to pumping out those masterpieces. Like check out Harmony of Despair, and Order of Ecclesia, and Castlevania Judgment. Wow, I guess we should talk about that one for a second here. For this wild crossover fighting game, Konami grabbed the talents of Takeshi Obata, best known for his work on the Bakuman and Death Note manga. I'm a pretty big fan of his work and I absolutely adore his art style. And even if his designs here are a little too BDSM for my taste, there's still a few that I genuinely really like. The designs for Dracula, Trevor Belmont, and Saifa Belnades look fire here, and I don't feel like they get the credit they deserve. But not all of them are winners. I love me some whack character designs, but even some of these are baffling. Like, why is Grant a bondage mummy instead of a based pirate? Why is Eric Lecard a little Shota boy? Why did they make Simon a stripper? But getting away from all that, I really don't want to skip out on my absolute favorite of this entire era, Kojima's Dracula X Chronicles artwork. The game itself is a remake of Rondo of Blood for the PSP, and while the in-game visual style isn't ugly by any means, the promotional art for it just overshadows it in so many ways. Even though it's tied pretty damn close to Symphony of the Night and Aria of Sorrow, I gotta say this is hands down some of the best video game art I've ever seen. Seeing one of my favorite Castlevania games reinterpreted through the eyes of one of my favorite artists is just so damn cool to me. So after all the insane artistry of the Pretty Boy era, all those badass and beautiful characters, you may be wondering where the series went from here. I can answer that for you. It went absolutely nowhere. We arrive at the last era of Castlevania art, the Dead Zone, because there really isn't a lot to talk about. There were the Lords of Shadow games, and while I'm sure those are great, I don't feel like their art direction is really anything special, with all of their covers just having a weak-ass CG character stand in front of a boring background. There's no Ayami Kojima, no Ooga Booga buff men, and certainly no BDSM for us to enjoy. The total lack of any Castlevania games can of course be attributed to Konami being itself, long since realizing they didn't have to try to make shit tons of money. But in their absence, other people have stepped up to scratch that hot vampire itch just as well. For one, that Netflix Castlevania show looks consistently stunning and was clearly made by people who actually care about the series and its insane lore. The fact they were able to translate Kojima's signature style to animation and make it look as good as it does is truly something worth praising. And we can't forget about that cowboy hat loving madman Koji Igarashi with his Fire series Bloodstain. Igarashi seriously came through with Ritual of the Night, offering a huge beautiful gothic castle to explore, all the while passing that artistic torch to the game's gorgeous box art. And something that I just found out about at the day of this video's release, in 2019 Konami released the mobile game Castlevania Grimoire of Souls, which prominently features Kojima's artwork for the first time in years. It brings all these generations of Belmonts together and they all look amazing. So even though the Castlevania series is probably dead beyond a few collection packs and mobile games, I'm not going to be a whiny bitch about it, because Koji Igarashi, that Netflix team, and the fans are preserving its legacy just fine. If there's some total gems I missed, because I know I did, let me know in that comment section about it. This series is home to some of my legit favorite art pieces of all time, and I hope I was able to do at least some of it justice with this here video. Sorry I didn't mention Kid Dracula.
Chicken.